Square Ball Podcast.
Well, Leeds United's success in the 24-25 season, Phil, is going to be determined by the work that they do over the summer. There's a lot of squad churn happening this time. Looking down the list of people, now the retained list at the time of recording has not come out, but I suppose we're not expecting any surprises there, are we? Particularly, we're looking at Shackleton, Cooper, Dallas, Ayling, Drame, Poveda, Robin Koch, of course, out of contract this time. Players who are likely to leave Leeds. What do you reckon?
Well, just to remind people, the retained list is anybody who's out of contract. So if there's a certain player who you hate and want to see leave, but they're under contract, they're not going to be on it. So there's no point kicking off with me on Twitter about that. That's just how it is every year. And we seem to go through this routine with, every 12 months of going, no, this is just the people who are at the end of their deals. Robin Koch has already agreed a deal with Eintracht Frankfurt, so he was gone as of last summer. The interesting one, I think, will be Liam Cooper. I spoke to a couple of people this morning who said it still seems to be up in the air, that expectation has been that he will go. And I think from his perspective, just doesn't feel like he's playing anywhere near enough at his time of life and stage of career. And there's definitely other interest in him as well. Had they gone up, I think you would have found it really, really difficult to see where Cooper was going to fit. Being in the Championship, and given that the squad is pretty young, and Farker has spoken quite a lot about the inexperience, I suppose it increases the chances that Leeds might want him to stick around. He thinks an awful lot of Byram, does Farker, which makes me think, that there might be some mileage in that. Shackleton, at the end of his contract, I mean, surely just needs to find somewhere to play now. He's spent a lot of time, a lot of years having a good pre-season, because the thing about Shackleton is he's dead fit. Stamina is great, so when you get into pre-season, he runs further than most people, he runs quicker than most people. He's just, really sort of dynamic. So coaches look at him and like him and think,
That's what I'm saying. He's dead fit, but always dead injured.
The injuries don't help as well.
Yeah.
But he has these periods where he comes into the team and he does a job. It's all good, and then he gets replaced and he doesn't really get any minutes of any note after that. And that's been going on for ages now with him, what feels like about 5 or 6 years. So he's at the end of this deal. You would think, time for a fresh start. Others as well. Obviously, Dallas has retired, so that that will be him. Really interested to see what he does, actually, whether he goes into coaching. There was a bit of a conversation with Leeds, I think, about what could be next for him, but I suspect he'll take some time just to take stock. And then others like Lewis Bate and so on, who just have not been heavily involved at all. So yeah, I don't think there'll be any wild shocks with the retained list, but really interested to see what happens with Cooper.
But some of the peripheral players who are leaving, in terms of this year's squad anyway, there will be some big money in there. You're looking at Dallas, Cooper, Ayling, even people like Bate and Poveda who came in from top 4 clubs.
Yeah.
Maybe not top 4 anymore in Chelsea's case, but at the time, Champions League clubs who have been earning a lot of money there. It'll be quite a weight lifted, you would think, in terms of the finances. Yeah,
Shackleton's not on small money. Poveda won't be on small money. Drame, you'll remember he's out of contract. When he went to Birmingham agreed an option to sign him this summer, even though his deal was going to be up, and that very much suggested that Leeds would make him an offer because he's under the age of 24 to make sure that they were entitled to compensation, which they can then get. Poveda's 24, so they can't do that with him. And yeah, you're right, it will shift quite. Ayling has obviously signed a deal with Middlesbrough as well, but to all intents and purposes, he was gone as of January when he left. So it will remove money from the wage bill, and it will definitely help. And then, of course, you have a couple of loanees going back as well. You've got Roberts, you've got Rodon, and you've got Jadon Anthony. I'm absolutely certain that they'll take Rodon back if they can. I think there's... I think Roberts is quite an attractive option as well because of his age, and actually because he has a very, very good Championship right back. And I think if you were taking him on, the plan this summer would be get him up to speed, let him play, as opposed to like just the odd appearance here and there.
On Rodon, he's just signed an extension with Spurs, hasn't he? I think it was that triggered at the club level that they've done that, extended him by a year, which possibly then opens the door to a return or maybe a loan to buy, something like that.
Yeah, it's difficult. Financially for Leeds, obviously they're going to pull a lot of money in, but how much they'll actually be able to spend in terms of fees will depend on what they do accrue from players who leave. And I think financially, again with Rodon, it probably suits more to be able to do him on loan if you can. And I mean, I don't know what Rodon's other options would be, but you would think that he certainly seemed to be very happy here, and it's been one of his best seasons in terms of his own personal form. So it would make sense.
Yeah, if you want to see which way the wind's blowing, just follow his brother on Twitter.
Yes, yeah, basically, yeah.
Just can't keep
It used
it
to be
to
like
himself.
used to be like David Sullivan's son at West Ham, didn't he? He just used to tweet, "Yeah, we're signing Byram tomorrow." You go, "Oh, great." Yeah.
Does it feel like to you like maybe there is almost a policy level decision to undo as much of the work of Victor Orta as possible, or are we seeing perhaps just the fruits of his labour now being sort of moved on, put out to pasture, and they're taking a slightly different tack, perhaps? Because I'm looking at the players who are peripheral. So you've got a lot of the players who we've listed there, like Pervader and Bate and stuff, were all the kind of the young guns who were brought in from other academies, that they've not really been successful. Even Gelhart's gone completely off the boil, that kind of thing. And
there are, I always say this, there are some that have worked. So Somerville, Strike, Mellier, good signings. I'm quite interested in Mellier, actually, whether or not that might be a route to money this summer.
I was actually just going to say that was leading me to my next point, that the players we've listed there and the ones that Orta brought in that have been a success are all the ones that represent it's not just money in, but it's actually good money in from a PSR point of view, isn't it? Because they were bought, it's buy low, sell high.
Yeah,
basically.
basically. But there are a lot who came in at academy level, who haven't trained on and haven't come through, and that happens. That happens. But I think it's not that they'll completely abandon the emerging talent idea, but it felt very much like last summer and in January like there was a shift towards signing not signing players that wouldn't be useful for you if you went up, but signing players that are going to do it for you now and putting your money into that. And I suppose you have to do it. There is obviously the issue of the players who have been out elsewhere this summer. Koch obviously departs. I think actually that has been one of those that they were less than impressed with. Obviously, they weren't happy about the loan deals, the loan clauses generally, but with Koch, it was set up in a way that meant that he's basically been able to go on a free transfer. And whatever you think of Koch, he is a Germany international. The thought was that he's going to go to the Euros. He should be worth a decent fee, and isn't. Roca sounds like we'll stay in Spain with Betis. Via the loan clause. Harrison's is still active as well, so he can go out again if someone pays his salary for the full year. I think that's it. I think that's all. So that leaves people like Llorente, who, from what I can gather in Italy, Roma would quite like to keep Llorente, or certainly open to that. I don't think Christensen. Aronson coming back from Union Berlin. What do they do with that? I've said before, it might change through the summer when he watches them training, but I don't feel like Farke will be particularly bothered about any of these players coming back into the mix.
Crystal ball time then, Phil. We know you like to do this sort of thing. Put your prediction hat on. What sort of player, not necessarily individual players, but what sort of player do you think Leeds are going to try and target in this summer window? Because I've been a big advocate in the past of Grizzled Championship bastards.
Yes.
Which is just, it's a tongue-in-cheek way of saying players who are kind of experienced at this level. Do you think they will go for that similar sort of, I don't know, mid-20s upwards kind of player rather than focusing on youth? Because has youth, and it's one of the questions actually we've been asked on this week's members show, which will be coming out this weekend, was, did we maybe expect too much out of our young players? You look at like a lot of the forward line was young this year that maybe didn't quite get us over the line, and particularly you're looking at Wembley, how many of those forward players actually stepped up on the big occasion? Did we put too much on their shoulders, and do we need that little bit more experience? Will they target that this summer, you think? I think
they will. I feel like a lot of the attention will be paid to that slightly older bracket. I mean, one of the players that I always keep an eye on, because it's Farke, is Oliver Skep down at Spurs, who he had at Norwich. Tried in that window to get Ampadu as well, and it ended up being Skep who did great things for him. And Skep seems to be on the periphery at Spurs. Whether or not Leeds really need a central midfielder is debatable, and I suppose depends on what happens with others who are in there, particularly Archie Gray. If you are losing people like Somerville and Nonto for money, then you're going to have to strengthen out wide. I mean, there's absolutely no question of that, especially if Farke is playing the same sort of system. I feel like they have to. I think they could do with the change at right back, and if Gray is staying, I would like to see Gray play in the middle. And I think having a kind of recognised right back in somebody like Roberts probably is beneficial. I think as the season's gone on as well, it's felt to me like having a left-footed left back is no bad thing either, as good as Byram can be in that position. And I'm still not sure if that's Firpo or not. But at this level, Firpo's clearly been better than he was in the Premier League. But he's down to a year now. So again, if you were signing another left back, you surely try and take a bit of money for Firpo, you would think, especially if Byram is sticking around. The biggest question is probably, what do they do up front? Do they say to themselves, because they've got Bamford under contract, they've got Pirro and they've got Joseph, who you presume will come to the fore a bit more now. Do they say to themselves, that's enough and we can make do with that and that will get us there? Or actually, does it need another bit of a refresh? And I think equally, in behind at 10, Farke probably needs to ask himself whether or not he has the right range of options there and the right variety. It's fine when it works with Rutter. When it doesn't work with Rutter, who plays there? I still don't know the answer to that.
Would you be tempted to maybe push, assuming that it is the two wide players, Somerville and Gnonto, who do go, that you push Georgie out to the left, maybe into the Somerville role, and then you look at a more dedicated link-up man at number 10? Yeah,
he can play out wide, Rutter, although he hasn't really for his time at Leeds. And yeah, I think I think that's a fair old shout. I mean, if I'm thinking about the players who impressed in the Championship this season, Schmodix at Blackburn was very, very good, I thought, in that game at Ellen Road. I was really sort of quietly impressed with him, and not just because of the goal. And there are a couple at Coventry as well. O'Hare always when he plays well, always stands out as really, really strong player. They probably do just need, as I say, if Rutter is playing really well and is on his game, he feels fine at 10. But when it's not happening for him, I do think that's been a bit of an issue this season, of looking at the squad and thinking who's perfectly suited, to fit in there, to do the Hernandez, basically.
Don't you think Georgie sort of thrived when he was pushed a little bit further out wide, when he had a bit more space to play in? Because you often find that the middle was congested against a lot of teams.
Yeah, I mean, there were periods where he was good in both, to be fair to him, but he just never got it going again, did he? Particularly after his operation and after the international break. And to be fair, with the exception of the Norwich game, the second Norwich game, neither did Leeds as a whole. So it's definitely not a case of needing major surgery. But the thing about this summer is it's not like a Premier League summer where you're steady in that division and you can kind of retain most people and work around the edges. They are going to have to sell people, so they will have gaps to fill.
Yeah. In terms of the clauses that we inherited coming down, is there anything in the pipeline for people that maybe were not generating much interest last summer but would this year? Because I'm thinking like Firpo and Bamford were injured a lot and out of form. They both had all right seasons, I suppose, that may generate some interest. And Somerville was nothing like didn't have any kind of a profile really. It's got a few goals only under Jesse Marsh, but that was essentially it. Whereas now you think there's probably a dozen Premier League teams that take him. Yeah,
I think they'll take the money for Somerville. I do think he'll go. I'd put Gnonto on the list of people that potentially as well. Meslier. I always feel like with Firpo, you could almost certainly find a buyer in Spain for Firpo or a taker in Spain. For Bamford, it's a little bit more difficult, really, partly because his wage will be high, so it's not like it's a salary that Championship clubs, for example, can easily pick up. And I really don't know, there was some talk last season in January about Forest being sort of, semi-keen on Bamford, but I don't know how much interest there would be in the Premier League as a whole at the moment. It doesn't... Of the teams who've gone up, it doesn't feel to me like he would necessarily particularly fit Leicester or Southampton or Ipswich. And, that, like I say, that seems to me to be one of the positions where they need to think about what they're going to do.
Yeah, I could imagine MLS for Bamford.
I just looked out Saudi, it's 46 degrees at the moment. That's probably a bit too hot.
But you can imagine him maybe, I don't know, getting on the phone to Click and saying, what's it like out there? And because what an easy life you've got there compared to the scrutiny that he's under at Leeds constantly.
It's kind of funny the way it's gone, actually, isn't it? That it's a mark, I think, of how much MLS is growing and how attractive it's becoming, that it has become... Obviously, like Saudi, there's just huge cash over there, so you're getting some really big names going to Saudi Arabia. But for pretty well established European footballers, MLS seems to be becoming more and more attractive. So yeah, he's definitely one to watch. And as I say, it's not like the squad needs a complete revamp, but it is going to need work. Yeah, and they are going to have to get it right.
There's been a bit of noise about Jebison at Sheffield United, who's out of contract as well. He's under 24, so that would involve compensation. But have you heard anything about about that, noise around that?
Not him specifically, but he's a good player, actually. Yeah. And again, would kind of fit with what they've been doing, or tally with the way they've been thinking about transfers to this point.
Although he doesn't necessarily fall into that bracket of slightly older. You are talking about a younger player there, but then again, has played at Premier League level as well.
You still need to get the balance right, though. I think the way you would look at it, and the way I think Leeds will look at it, is to try and bulk up with fairly established and proven, not experienced in the sense that they've been around the block 100 times, but players who clearly know what they're doing. And, this sort of Ampadu, Rodon core. But you never want to rule out younger players. And Farke has spoken about this quite a lot, about the need when they get promoted, if and when they get promoted, he keeps saying when, but, if and when they get promoted, having players who can then develop further, so that you don't go up and find that you need to dispense with 90% of your squad. I mean, there is part of me that feels like it's a little bit difficult to avoid that anyway, because of the kind of gap between the two divisions. But the more players that you can rely on and cope with in the Premier League, as Bielsa was able to in his first season, the easier it is.
What about Gruev? There's a bit of noise around Gruev potentially going, and the opportunity for Leeds to maybe bank 10 million quid's worth of profit there. Would you bite at that?
Would you let him go?
No. I'd much rather keep him.
It's better to not, but if it's the opportunity to bank 10 million quid immediately, you could see why they'd be tempted.
It depends where they think the ceiling of the player is, I suppose. And if they're going, right, we'll buy a right back, we'll buy a centre back, so then all of a sudden you gain Ampadu and Gray as midfield options, don't you? Which in some ways makes more sense, because I think that's probably where they both should be playing.
I think that's probably the point, isn't it? If you are shifting Gray into midfield and you're sort of committing to playing him there, which I suspect he would want, then you have to ask how many, because Kamara seems to fall somewhere between the two positions, where if you've got Ampadu and Gruev who both very much sit and hold. I suppose if there's a question about whether you really need Gruev, if that's the way it's going to set up, and if you have more options at centre-back, which mean that you don't have to shift Ampadu there at any stage, then perhaps money for Gruev becomes quite tempting. But he was pretty decent in parts of this season, and I'd be quite tempted to hang on, I think.
Very much so, but it's that money thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We shall see. Well, an interesting summer awaits, Phil.
Very much so.
It always does, though, doesn't it, with Leeds? Does you think, I'm just going to put my feet up just for a few... Oh, no, Leeds have done something again.
Well, I came back from the playoff final, and on the Monday I was thinking, right, nice quiet week. And then in the evening got a call saying, do you know that Red Bull are buying into Leeds? I was like, nah, here we go. Ring the bell. Yeah.
We go again. Right, cheers. We'll wrap it up there. We'll speak to you soon. See you soon.
Thank you.
The Square Ball Podcast.